take a look here. These are our stock servo setups that we use on the F-117 that works great. Can you zero in? That is just a push rod. It's crimped on, it's then zip tied, it's then hot glued. Yeah. The idea is it rolls the rod. It then rolls out, it then does a Louis, and then bends, and then hot glued and taped on there before you paint it. Doesn't stick to paint very well. You know what? You want to put a servo right there and do a regular? That's fine. It works fine. It just looks a little weird. It all depends on your buildability. The first one you do it ugly, because you're probably gonna crash it anyways. Don't waste a lot of build time. Do an ugly setup. Then once you get it dialed in, then do the nice thing, right? One thing at a time. Now then the V-tails, notice how the push rod is dog legging. So as the push rod is hitting the servo, it's hitting it straight. The servo's not binding. And then when the push rod is hitting the control, it's straight. You can hear the servos working free. Works great. And then one for the other side, of course, total of 4 servos. Okay, build. This is all 6mm. The one thing I didn't like is like this. So we have carbon going here, we have carbon going here like on the instructions. This no man's land, it just was very weak. Yeah. And what do you can't put carbon everywhere, because then wherever your fingers go, it's just too thin.
Yeah.
So I have 6mm with 3mm glued on the bottom. If I had it to do over again, what I would do is go to Grayson and order 9mm, and if he's out of stock, RC foam, wherever, or even the cheap foam from Lowe's or Home Depot, something thicker. You need the thickness. The plane doesn't mind the thickness. You can sand that down or not sand it down on the angles, it doesn't matter. Yes, you can get away with just 6. It's just gonna feel a little bit light. Here's another tip that I do on all my planes, especially this one that's needed. These parts are notched together. They notch in so you don't have to measure anything. It shows you where to go. The problem is when you're grabbing it like that, it's eventually gonna just pull that glue joint out. It doesn't matter if you use epoxy, super glue, hot glue, or all 3, yes, which we've been using, or epoxy and hot glue anyways. It eventually is gonna pull out. If you wanna take the time to sand that angle so it's flat, you can, but we don't. What I do is this. I take some epoxy and I just touch the tip with epoxy. Break it up.
Toothpick. Get
about half. And that's acting as a rivet. And every 3 inches I do a rivet, especially at the end here. So watch how I'm gonna do it. A little twisty twist. Take this thing.
With epoxy?
Yes, with just a micro drop of epoxy. And then that's gonna follow that hole. Well, that's a little bit sticking out. Then you take your little dikes, clip it off, then take a screwdriver or whatever, recess it in, take a little dab of paper towel, maybe some hand sanitizer, rubbing alcohol if that takes the epoxy off, and then do that about every 3 inches.
Do this before you put the skin on the bottom.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you do the skin, see that's, if this skin was off, it looks terrible underneath because there's rivets and carbon and it's just a mess. That was the plus side of putting the skin second, is that it cleaned it up. Ideally, I don't care. If I were to do this over again, I would get just one thick 9mm of some kind of foam and I would just rivet it, carbon it, and then just give it an extra slather of paint and then just don't show the camera the bottom. I don't care. But you know, what I care about is the strength. I just don't want this coming off over time. I just don't like that. I did add a little extra foam on the bottom of this because it was so long and so thin. Yeah. You can put carbon if you want, whatever. 3 sets of magnets, which are already coming off. Do you have a hot glue? No. Oh well. We'll fly off at 5. That's about it, right? I do have an extra carbon here on the tails, and I just glued them on and put some tape over it. I did bevel the prop slot. I cut it out slightly larger than stock. We make the prop slot small on all of these because you can cut to fit. You can always cut more out if you need it or want it. The more prop slot you cut out, the more power the plane has, the quieter it is, but the dorkier it looks and the weaker it gets. I also have carbon underneath here as well. There's quite a bit more carbon on this one than the smaller one.
Yes.
It's not any more skill to build, it's just more foam, more carbon, more glue, more time. That's it. But when you're done, the flight performance is also way more, so it's worth it.
Yes.
Done?
Sure.